So when, when Martin's got a script, he teases me about it a little bit because he says, I've got something for you, I'll send it to you when it's ready. And I think, and then I might wait a year. And then suddenly it appears in an email. Oh, I've sent it to you, have a read. And it's, it's just a gift. When I read the script, it was extraordinary, it was like a magical present to unopen, sort of electronically, obviously. And when I knew he was writing it for Francis, we discussed that before, and he briefly sort of sketched out the idea to me. But yeah, it was a beautiful thing to read, very exciting. And when I was at Martin was off already looking for Ebbing, as it were. So he was off scouting for it when I read it. Yeah. It's interesting because I was always told when you're making a film, your central character has to have an arc. There has to be a journey. He has to change. Somehow your central character has to change throughout a movie. But our central character in this film doesn't change. She goes to war at the beginning of the film, and she stays that way the whole time. But the people that change are all the people around her, Dixon and Willoughby. Everyone else changes except for Mildred, who sets out down this path and never leaves it, But she's the person who the movie is pinned. For me, the movie all hinged around. You needed to take around Mildred. You needed to take the audience on the journey with Mildred. Everything else is a satellite around her. That's what I mean. So as an audience, you needed to say, right, this is your character you're going to pin yourself on, and you need to follow her journey. So you'll notice that a lot of the scenes, even though other characters are playing the scene, they'll be played on Frances, on her reaction, because it was always very key to us about where the camera was with Frances, what we were showing of her. Are we giving the audience all of her reaction? When do we turn around and say, this is what Frances is feeling, So maybe the shot would be over here and you just get a suggestion. And then when you wanted to, you'd use this and deliver France. Well, for me, the town was very important. When I read the script, I had a very different mental picture of what Ebbing was going to be. My mind was more in places like Paris, Texas, small town, broad, flat, endless landscapes, sort of heartland. So I was very surprised when, and I know Martin went all over America, starting in Missouri and Mississippi and Savannah. He went for Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. He went everywhere looking for this place, and then he found this one town which was obviously fit for him and what he'd written and what his mental picture of the film was. So when I arrived there, it was a much greener. It was very verdant and beautiful and very sort of mountainous and hilly. You're in the Smoky Mountains, so it was very different than I thought. What shocked me first, particularly looking at the first images, taking stills, was how green it was. You were surrounded by this green. So anyway, I went to look at Ebbing. Ebbing was kind of what I thought it would be. It's like a main drag through a city and everything exists around that one main street. And Martin picked it because he was very particular that the police station should be opposite the advertising agency, and Dixon's house should overlook the town, and Mildred's house had to be close by but look over the billboards. And I try and say to Martin, we could cheat that, Martin. We could have them looking there and shoot the billboards at another location, and we can cut round that. But he was determined not to do that. So anyway, so I went to Ebbing, and my the way I like to work in prep is there's a danger when you're DP, when you're prepping, of getting stuck in the office and endless meetings about very banal things, and just countless discussions about the same subject. And you can get rooted to the office if you're not careful, but I like to go and spend as much time as I can at the locations. And if someone wants to have a meeting, I could do it on the phone or at the end of the day, but each day I'd go with Martin as much as possible and spend time at the locations and learn the feel of that town. Yeah, that was kind of the history of it, and that was me getting to know Ebbing and spending at each location that we were going to shoot at. I'd try and spend a day there and see it in the morning, see it in the evening, see it in the middle, and see how it responded to light. People have compared the film to some sort of Coen brothers thing. In fact, Joel was on set quite often because he's obviously married to Frances and he was accompanying her while she was there. But I don't think that's particularly fair to Martin, really, to say, or to the Coen brothers in a way, to say that Martin's work is similar. I guess Frances is a very strong connection because and the character she plays is Fargo-esque. Was I afraid that Martin might use Roger? No, because Martin and I are very fond of each other. We go, but it's a difficult question, really. My methodology with lighting is to embrace what is there and then somehow try and manipulate it and shape it into something that you can respond to. For exteriors or interiors, you have a look at the situation. So, what's the light doing? Do I like what that's doing? Yes, I do. How do I enhance that? How do I manipulate that into something that's more pleasing? Without something looking. Things can look very lit. I gave an example yesterday. I don't know if you remember, where there was a scene. There were a few scenes in the kitchen in Mildred's house where I pre-lit them the day before, and I put some HMIs outside the window. So we didn't have any big HMIs. We had what we had because it was very low budget. But I put some HMIs outside the window, and I had sort of shafts of light with a little bit of atmos. Looked beautiful. I was really pleased with it. I thought, that looks great. And then Frances came in to rehearse, and she was just wearing a dressing gown, no makeup, bed hair. And she just got up, and they were sitting down for a mundane breakfast, eating this here. And looking at through the eyepiece, I realised that I'd gone wrong. That was a mistake, because I was aware of the light, and I thought it had to be mundane, and so that was, and that's a discipline that you have to impose upon yourself slightly. Am I over manipulating this? Am I too aware of what's going on with the lighting and also with shot choice? Are you too aware of where the camera is and what the camera's doing, The billboards need to change over time. That was difficult because, theoretically the grass needed to grow, the flowers needed to bloom, and then the billboards have several different states. A lot of our schedule was built around the dressing of the billboards. There's the first time you originally see them before they're renovated and Mildred puts up her posters, when they're Huggies. There's the time when they're just done, there's the time when they burn, there's the time post-burn, and then they redo them again. So there are I think there was 5 different stages of the billboards and what they needed to be, and obviously the area around the billboards is affected by the time jumps. The time of day was really important for me in this film because it's a location film, and I just felt we had to show the passage of time, and also some scenes needed to be shot at certain times. The journey to school I felt needed to be first thing in the morning, and I felt there's a scene where Frances is on her own tending to the flowers underneath the billboards, and there's a deer, and it's a very poignant moment, and I really felt that scene, I felt it needed to be shot at dusk, and so did Martin. He'd written it that way, and there's a melancholic feel to the scene, and it's introspective, and she's talking to us, and it just felt, there's that time of day, twilight has this, it's a time of stillness, and this deer appears, and it needed to be that time. That scene only could take place at that time in my mind, and it was very difficult to do that because it was a very important scene, and Martin was very apprehensive about us. Because I said, look, if we're going to shoot it like this, we have a window in which to shoot it, and it's probably 40 minutes that we need to get this scene. And it's more than one, it's not a one-shot scene. There are several angles. So I had to cajole him slowly into the idea of doing it, and then I worked with Peter on making sure that he was reassured by the chance he'd have a second opportunity the next day if it didn't work out. We'd do it again. And I'm really glad we did it, because I think, taking those gambles and those risks, he was worried, well, what if we don't get the scene and we run out of light? But we had Frances, I think she probably did it on take one. No, Frances, yeah. I think she probably did. Yeah, there's a flashback scene in the film where Frances says the most dreadful things to her daughter. And it's interesting because the way it cuts from her in the bedroom, she's in a moment of thought, and then you hear "Mum," and you think it's happening in the room, and then suddenly, it's very clever, and then you're into the flashback. And Martin and I discussed in the cut, there was a lot of debate of whether the movie needed that scene. For some people, they think it definitely does because it's shocking, but for some people, they felt it's unnecessary. Me personally, I'm on the fence about that one. But with the flashback scene, one thing that was very key to me, I didn't want to give the flashback scene a look. It's a flashback look. For me, it was very, there's enough going on in the scene for you to know, even if it takes you a few moments to realise it, that's a flashback. It didn't need some sort of photographic technique of any sort. I always say to her, she does what? How many Molotov cocktails does she throw? Well, can't she just throw 2? No, she has to throw 4. And I said, well, how come Dixon doesn't notice when he's sitting there? But it kind of, the extraordinary thing about Martin is it does work, Even though I will always question Martin and will say, well, why? How come he doesn't see this fire that's raging behind him? And he would say, because he's Dixon. Which I love about Martin. And he throws away all sense of logic or backstory, But he's interesting, So I'm going to move on to a sort of slightly different point about the interesting thing about Martin is now I've done it a couple of times now is filming with people who come from a theatrical background, based in theatre, and who, particularly Martin, obviously not only who writes theatre but also theatre directors, where. For them, you see, the script is a very different thing. With most sort of in the filmmaking world, the script is something that's slightly malleable that you can look at and that you can, an actor might say, I don't know about this line, maybe we should change that. Or what about, or the director might say, well, instead of, I know in the script it says that you come in, but what about if you already, whereas when you work with people from the stage, the word is, the script is sacrosanct. The words. You don't go, you don't get Macbeth and say, well, let's just, maybe that line doesn't work, we'll change that. You just don't do that. So it's a very different process, When it was negative, you'd gamble. The best results you got, the best results I ever got shooting negative was the bigger gamble you took. When you played with a negative, when you underexposed or overexposed certain things, you pre-flashed, you bleach bypass, you cross-processed, all those, you took the risks and you got the rewards. With digital, those risks aren't there anymore because you have a calibrated monitor, so you can see the risk. So I think it's more possible. I think it opens up a whole new world of experimentation and pushing things to far different areas than we've done before. So, you know, that I think is one of the, you know, I miss film definitely, but I think that's one of the great advantages of digital, is that you can push things further than you would have done before, you know, in terms of exposure and in terms of, you know, colour, because it's there to be seen. It's funny because there's things that I shot in silhouette. You know, you always fall in the trap, you know, the DI suite. There's things I wanted to be a silhouette, but later on we're going, oh, let's bring up the face a little bit so we can see, and, you know, that wasn't the original intention, and I kind of always, if it's not the original intention, I always wonder why you're doing it, but that's the, I think that's the drawback of the DI suite. You know, it's a DI suite is like it's like some sort of political think tank. You know, you have to be able to know as a DP how to play the room, you know, how to work the room, and, you know, because it is a minefield, the DI suite. You know, you can go down some very dangerous avenues and everybody thinks they've got a voice. It's, yeah.